2025 was, overall, an incredible year for gaming. There were so many incredible titles, and it was also the first year I decided to dip my toes into streaming, with a focus on mystery games and visual novels. It was a blast, and to wrap up the end of the year, I'm going to rank each of the games that I played on stream this year. As you may know, I did play a number of fan-made Danganronpa games this year, or fangans. For the purpose of this list, I will be excluding them. Partly because one of them wasn't even a game, and partly because I wanted to keep this list to properly published titles. That said, I still recommend checking them out and supporting the Danganronpa Another Duology and Danganronpa Antebellum Lockdown. They're both great. I'm also not including any of the indie games that I played for Spooktober, since that was more of a showcase instead of a proper series. This will be a spoiler-free list, since the purpose is to give my opinion of each game. And if it sounds interesting to you, I encourage you to check it out for yourself. The final list is made up of 7 games, and will be going from my least favorite to my favorite, starting with... Shoot in Order is the worst game that I streamed this year, and it really does pain me to say that, because I really wanted to like this game. The presentation is phenomenal, the base premise is interesting enough, and the idea of having each route be a different genre is so cool. But I cannot honestly say that I enjoyed this game. And it's the only game that I streamed this year that I would personally give below a 5 out of 10, essentially meaning that I had more issues with it than things I liked. The general premise is that Rei Shimobe is our amnesiac protagonist, and she needs to find out which of 5 suspects killed her so that she can save the world. The game has 5 main routes, one for each of the suspects, and each route is based on a different genre of game. There's a murder mystery, a romance adventure, a stealth action horror game, and so on. Now, to be entirely fair, I have not played every route. I've completed the prologue, the Ministry of Justice route, and am partly through the Ministry of Security route. The Ministry of Justice route is labeled as a murder mystery, and it's not a very good one. There are a good handful of logical holes, the characters are incredibly flat, and most of them are unlikable and can even be annoying. And to an extent, I get it. They're meant to be unlikable, but that doesn't change the fact that I just don't like being around these people. And this wouldn't be as much of an issue if the main characters were a little more developed. But Rei and Inugami, while not as flat as the supporting cast, still aren't the most interesting to me. Any choices along the way are also completely superfluous. You don't even get flavor text some of the time, so why even have these choices at all? There's also the matter of the snap mechanic. To explain briefly, when you investigate an item or a statement, you can choose to snap at it. This is basically the equivalent of pressing for more information, like in Ace Attorney. Great idea. There's just one teeny tiny problem. If you snap on something that the game deems irrelevant, you will get a hit to your trust bar, which is basically equivalent to your health. I cannot even begin to describe how annoying this is. Why, oh why, would you ever design a mechanic that punishes the player for investigating and wanting to gather more information? Especially in a mystery game. It was annoying when Ace Attorney penalized you for pressing, but at least that was only in a handful of testimonies. This is just how it works for the entire route, and it is so... I do want to end on something more positive, though, so I will list the things that I've liked about the game so far. The best thing about Shoot in Order is easily the presentation. The art style and text bubbles are reminiscent of comic books, and the use of colors, paneling, and movement on the sprites is all very pleasing. And the music is great, too, as to be expected from Masafumi Takada. I genuinely don't think I've heard a bad overall soundtrack from this man. I also think the idea of having each route be a different genre isn't a bad one. It's just that the execution of the routes themselves is below par, at least in the Ministry of Justice route. Which is a shame, because I also think that the overall mystery we're trying to solve is an interesting one. And look, maybe the rest of the game is better, but as it stands with what I have played, I can't honestly say that I enjoyed this one too much as I really did want to. No Sleep for Kaname Date is the third entry in the the Somnium Files franchise, and serves as a mid-quill between the first two entries. It's the first game to be directed by someone other than Uchikoshi, and it follows Iris as she tries to survive a deadly escape game with the help of Date and Aiba. There's the typical gameplay that you're used to in the series, that being investigating and Somnium, as well as escape room segments that are very reminiscent of the Zero Escape franchise. All of these were executed pretty well overall, and I didn't feel like one overpowered the others. I followed this game from announcement to release, and as a huge fan of the series, I was thrilled to see it continue. And my overall opinion on the game is that it's fun. It's a very low-stakes adventure compared to the other two entries, so if you're expecting something on the scale of the past two games, you won't really get that here. But I think that's okay. This feels more like a snack between meals rather than an entree, if that makes sense. And it's a rather tasty snack. The characters are fun, in my opinion. This is the best the series has ever looked visually, and there is one particular Somnium that honestly more than justified the game's entire existence for me. I can't go into it due to spoilers, but if you've played it and you're a fan of the overall series, you probably know which one I'm talking about. I think the lack of Uchikoshi as a director is most evident in the overall mystery being less intriguing than in the other two games. But at the same time, I didn't have any, major issues with it either. It just lacks that extra mind-bending aspect that Uchikoshi usually puts into his work. But speaking of Uchikoshi, that transitions us nicely into... Okay, let's talk about 100 Line. This is definitely the game I spent the most hours streaming this year, and got a total of... 3 endings out of 100. Yeah, this game is absolutely massive. I got through a few more routes after I stopped streaming the game, but I am still not even close to seeing everything. So, no, I do not have an opinion on the game overall yet. I can only speak on what I have played. But I've still put tens of hours into this game, so I think I'm allowed to at least have some sort of opinion. And that opinion is... it's alright. Yeah, after sitting with it for a while, I think that's where I stand. This game is hard for me to discuss because it's just so vast, and it has some of the highest highs and lowest lows out of any game on this list. But I think my biggest overall take is that I wish this game prioritized quality over quantity a bit more. If they trimmed the fat, tightened up the pacing, and kept only the best routes, I think this game would be higher for me. But as it is, I have to look at the overall picture, and in terms of the routes I've played and seen so far, that's where I stand. This game was a collaborative effort between Kodaka and Uchikoshi, the creators of the Danganronpa and Zero Escape series, respectively. Between the two, Kodaka's influence is much stronger. And that makes sense, since apparently he was the one who came up with the premise and the characters, and essentially handed over his toys for Uchikoshi to play with. And yeah, these are very much Kodaka characters. Which, I'm gonna be honest, I've always been more partial to Uchikoshi's casts. I understand Kodaka leans far more into the eccentric and over-the-top characters, and that can be interesting and entertaining, and there are a few characters that I like in this game. But Uchikoshi's characters are often more grounded and realistic, feeling more like real people to me. And again, I don't think that one is inherently better than the other. It's just overall, I enjoy the casts of Zero Escape and the Somnium Files more than those of Danganronpa or Raincoat on average. But for what the game actually is, if you enjoy Kodaka's work, this has some of his best. Tangent aside, I do think the game has a lot to offer. A lot that I haven't even seen yet. And I think if nothing else, the human effort that went into something like this is worth acknowledging. If it sounds remotely interesting to you, I'd say give it a shot. Just make sure you have a lot of spare time and a lot of patience. You're going to need it. Yet another killing game is what I'd call a hidden gem. This was actually the first game I ever streamed, and it was a pretty damn good one. It's a death game featuring an amnesiac protagonist and two other girls named Cecilia and Oriana. The three of them are trapped in a mysterious old house, and the only way out is for one of them to die. Yet another killing game claims to be inspired by series like Danganronpa, Ace Attorney, and Zero Escape. As someone who is a fan of all three, I will say that it very much draws the most from Zero Escape in terms of the story, but that's the most I can say without getting into spoilers. For a game with such a small cast, the characters have to be well done, and I'm happy to say that they are. The two girls are very different, but likable and fleshed out enough that it's easy to get attached to them. The core mystery is also really, really good, and seeing it all unravel was incredibly satisfying, with several twists and turns that come together for a very enjoyable ride. The game isn't super long, taking me a little over 10 hours, but I think it makes the most of its time and doesn't overstay its welcome. It's also an indie game, which I'm always passionate about supporting as a fellow dev. So, if you're interested in a well-put-together little mystery with a solid emotional core, then please, check this one out. The most succinct way I can describe Gnosia is a visual novel where you play werewolf in space. You may also know this game as Mafia, or yes, that one, but the story follows you, the custom-named protagonist, as you're stuck in a time loop after one or more people have been infected by an alien life form called Gnos. And it's your job as a crewmate to discover who they are and vote them into cold sleep. Or, if you're the Gnosia, eliminate the majority of the crew without getting caught. And hopefully, along the way, figure out how to escape the loop. There's a lot of great things about this game. For one, the art style. I love the almost watercolor look it has, and the character designs are this perfect blend of being sci-fi, but also having its own unique feel at the same time. The writing overall is also pretty solid. It's nothing incredibly mind-blowing, but I also didn't really have any major issues with it. If anything, I wish we got a little more depth with some of the cast, because they're overall very enjoyable characters. The core game loop is also solid. You can build up your stats to accommodate how you want to play the game, and unlock skills to make it easier. The learning curve is gradual and at just the right pace where I felt like I was improving, but never too quickly or too slowly. My biggest issue with Gnosia, though, is that it's very repetitive. I understand that's kind of the point. It's a time loop, and there's enough variety that it's never insufferable, but there can be points where it drags when you're trying to get one specific piece of information or trigger a certain event. Thankfully, the game has an event search option, otherwise it would be borderline impossible to beat the game without a walkthrough. But even then, sometimes you need certain things to happen in that loop, and sometimes those things are just dependent on luck. So, if you're like me, you can spend over half an hour on one loop because Rakia won't freaking cooperate like I am trying to help you. But beyond that, the game is still very enjoyable. You learn just enough about the cast to get to know them, and the story was intriguing enough to keep me invested. It even has an anime that's currently airing, so if that's more up your alley, you can check that out too. If you like these kind of social deduction games, time loop stories, or both, then give this one a shot. Dispatch was definitely a wild card in terms of games I played this year. I don't usually stream games that aren't somewhere in the mystery genre, but this won a poll, and I included it as an option because I also really enjoy narrative-driven, choose-your-own-adventure type games. Think Until Dawn or Telltale style. And the premise looked fun, that you're a dispatcher for superheroes at a call center. and I'm happy to say that I had a really great time with this one. It's told across 8 episodes, each about an hour, and follows Robert Robertson, aka former superhero Mecha Man. The story wasn't anything I hadn't seen before in other shows or movies, but what really carried it for me was the characters. Everyone was memorable and well-designed, even minor characters. What I didn't quite understand going in, though, was that the dispatching was also the main game mechanic. I wasn't the best at it, but I never got genuinely frustrated because it was just so engaging. It was fairly simple to learn, but just deep enough to keep me on my toes. And again, the characters quipping between missions and seeing the different comical scenarios that played out was a blast. Honestly, my biggest issue with the game came when it tried to be more serious. I just don't think it quite lands because the story doesn't take the time to flesh out most of these plot points. I would need to go into spoilers to give all the specific examples, but the game opens with Robert discussing his relationship with his father, something I wish got more attention than it does. Because when the game does give us time to delve into the details, it can land emotionally. Again, spoilers, but if you've played the game, you probably know what flashback I'm talking about. Even if I do have some issues with the story and wish some things were explored more in depth, the reason dispatch is so high is for the pure and simple reason that it was so much fun. It was fun to play, and in a list of my own enjoyment of games, that's gonna score you a lot of points. And this brings us to my favorite game I played this year, The Somnium Files, Nirvana Initiative. From what I understand, this game is a bit contentious in the fandom, and I do understand why. I don't think it's as good as the first one, but the first Somnium Files is also one of my favorite games of all time, so high bar. There are also a few twists that I'm not the biggest fan of, but none of them are such a stretch that it breaks my suspension of disbelief or ruins the experience. Because the overall experience was still really, really fun. It's the same gameplay as the first, aside from a couple of minor additions like the Wink Sync. The story and mystery are intriguing, the game is very well paced, but the biggest reason it's my favorite game I played this year is the characters. Mizuki, Date, and Aiba were just as enjoyable as in the first game, for the most part, and I love them so much. While the new side characters were average to me, this game did introduce my favorite character in the entire franchise, Ryuki. He shares the protagonist role with Mizuki, and he's just so great, as is his AI ball, Tamba. These two's dynamic is so fun, as is seeing Mizuki's with Aiba. Like I mentioned before, I have such a fondness for a lot of Uchikoshi's characters. When he makes a good cast, it's a really good cast. And if you put a great cast and a good story with fun gameplay and emotional beats that hit hard, that's a recipe for a game I'm going to love. If you haven't played the Somnium Files series, and you like mystery games, or even just a good thriller detective series, I cannot recommend it enough. And that's going to wrap up my rankings. Hopefully I'll be able to get through even more games next year, and I've gotten a lot of great suggestions that I'm keeping on a list. But if you've got any other recommendations, please leave a comment and let me know. Or let me know what you thought of any of these games if you've played them. If you'd like to join in on my streams, I post my schedule and usually stream on weekends, so feel free to come and say hi. I'd love to see you there. And if you have been on the streams, thank you so much. It really means the world to me, and I cannot wait for another year of gaming and content. Until then, thank you very much for watching. I'd also like to take a moment to shout out my amazing channel members. At the Star Detective tier, Orange Tiers 1. At the Star Investigator tier, Vocaloid Evil, Zapier Ranger 20, and Mikey Mike SH. At the Star Sleuth tier, Mad Dinosaur, I, Zol X Archangel 15481, and MTO 2089. I appreciate you guys so much, and your support means a lot to me. If you'd like to join as a member, feel free to check out the tiers, with perks such as early access to videos, your name listed here, and special emotes and badges. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all next time.